The House will come to order. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 1555. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 1555, number 1 on the calendar for today, an act relating to transportation, the first engrossment.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein, the author of the bill.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. House File 1555 is the Transportation Omnibus Bill. Before I present the bill, I just have a few people I wanted to thank. First and foremost, our incredible nonpartisan staff for the Transportation Committee. They're back here. We have Andy Lee and Matt Burris. Thank you so much. You've always gone above and beyond the call of duty for all of us, and it's very appreciated. John Howe, our very able committee administrator, also put in many, many long hours this year. We have two great researchers from both sides of the aisle, Joe Marble from the Republican side, and Jennifer Nelson from DFL Research. We have a great committee legislative assistant, Claire Stephen, did a wonderful job. And we had great pages for our committee, who also went above and beyond the call of duty, Thomas Segalier and Chloe Burns. A real big thank you to the members of this committee on both sides of the aisle. I especially want to recognize our Vice Chair, Brad Tabke, who did incredible work from the beginning and really played an important role in helping to put together the proposal that's before us. And so our committee did have a lot of work to do. We have a combined policy and finance committee this year. And so with those combined committees, we had a lot on our agenda. And so I want to commend again our colleagues on both sides of the aisle. You worked with focus, with civility, with respect. And I especially want to thank the ranking member, Representative Torkelson, for your work. And while there's much to debate in this bill, and I can't say we've come to consensus quite yet, you have always been constructive and helpful and in the spirit of respect and even humor. And I appreciate that very much, Representative Torkelson. So members, we have done quite a bit of work to get to this day. Our committee conducted 5 field hearings in and around areas represented by members of our committee, again, from both sides of the aisle. We were in St. Cloud, Minneapolis, Blaine, Savage, and Mankato. We had upwards of 500 people show up at these hearings, and we received a clear message from Minnesotans. Transportation matters. Transportation is ultimately about people. It's not about this project or that project. It's not about this mode or that mode. Our economy and our prosperity depend on a safe, efficient, sustainable transportation system. We heard from businesses and farmers, transit riders, Minnesotans from all walks of life. And there was a common message from those Minnesotans. They said, put together a bill that is comprehensive, put together a bill where all parts of the state's needs are taken care of, invest in roads and bridges, invest in public transportation, whether it's in the metro area or in greater Minnesota. And I learned that from my transportation mentor, Representative Bernie Leader, that a successful bill has to address all corners of the state and all kinds of transportation. Those who rely on our roads and bridges and public transit. And so, members, that's exactly what this bill does. We align the well-documented transportation needs that both sides of the aisle agree in terms of the number. We align those needs with the revenue needed to address them in the short term and the long term. Our plan mirrors Governor Walz's priorities to make a bold, generational investment in transportation. It raises those revenues that are constitutionally dedicated, Article 14 in our state's constitution. Road and bridge money comes from the gas tax. It's dedicated solely to roads and bridges. Our gas tax increase is phased in with over 3.5 years with 5-cent increments. And we have additional license tab fees that we rely on in this legislation. This is an innovative plan, and we have many firsts in this transportation bill. One that I'm particularly proud of is that we have the first ever dedicated stream of funding to cities with populations of 5,000 members or less. We continue to support the Corridors of Commerce program to provide funding for important and long-delayed projects. We increase support for Greater Minnesota and Metro Transit, as well as our suburban transit operators. And we support new and exciting transit options such as bus rapid transit and electrification of our transportation system, as the transportation sector is now the leading source of greenhouse gas emissions in Minnesota. And it's the fastest growing source of greenhouse gases. We can't address climate change without acknowledging and addressing that fact. So members, there are great costs associated with doing nothing and continuing the status quo in transportation. In the past, this legislature, with the exception of the year 2008, when we overrode Governor Pawlenty's veto on a bipartisan basis, we've cobbled together short-term plans that barely scratch the surface in terms of addressing our needs. So we need a reliable and sustainable transportation funding system that can weather the storms of recession and budget deficits and to keep up with the needs of our growing state. We pay dearly for this status quo in lost productivity, wasted time in congestion, wasted gas sitting in traffic, crater-sized potholes that force unexpected expenses from flat tires and wheel alignments and all kinds of repairs that our citizens have to do, unexpected expenses. It adds up to about $1,000 per family, these congestion and infrastructure costs. We also heard, particularly in Mankato, very, very sad and compelling testimony from families that had lost loved ones on Highway 14. And there are many Highway 14s, unfortunately, in this state that need safety upgrades, that need improvements. So it's no wonder that the Society of Civil Engineers rated our road and bridge infrastructure as a D+ grade. We're not a D+ state. We can do better. This bill will raise our grade, provide jobs, and grow our economy. Transportation projects and needs don't go away. They just get more expensive if we don't address them. So the time to act is now. I look forward to our debate and discussion today, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members, for your interest in this critical issue. And I would be happy to entertain questions and address the many amendments that have been submitted for this bill. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, members.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hornstein moves to amend House File Number 1555, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A98.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Our House fiscal staff over the last week informed me that we had an additional $210,000 on the bottom line. We had a very low general fund target, but this money was not allocated. And so this amendment allocates it to Metro Mobility. I chose Metro Mobility because I think there's some bipartisan interest in supporting this very needed service, and I would ask for your support.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Pulowski moves to amend House File Number 1555, the first engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A87.
The member from Winona, Representative Pulowski. Or Representative Hornstein, whoever prefers. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Representative Pulaski's amendment, which I strongly support, is just simply a $160,000 appropriation for port development assistance, and this carries over from the 2017 special session. It cancels on June 30th, 2019, and those funds will be appropriated to the Winona Port. This is straightforward. It's non-controversial. I ask for your support.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Elkins moves to amend House File Number 1555, and the amendment is coded A94.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Elkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A month ago, a University of South Carolina co-ed named Samantha Josephson entered what she thought was her Uber car. It wasn't. She was taken out into the woods and murdered. What this amendment would do was enable Lyft initially to mount on the front dash of its vehicles a light which would be color-coded to one of 6 colors, which would be displayed on your Lyft app as well. And you would know not to enter the car unless the color on the this amp light on the dashboard matched the color that was being displayed on your Lyft app. So, and it very clearly also identifies the car as a shared mobility vehicle to local law enforcement. This bill is necessary because it would otherwise violate the state's prohibition about mounting stuff on your dash, but it does have the blessing of both the Department of Public Safety and MnDOT, and a companion amendment is in motion in the Senate as well.
Discussion. Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Elkins. I just think we owe it to the body to explain why this has come so late. It did not get heard in committee. I do support the idea, but I think it would be appropriate if we had a little more information about why it comes to us as an amendment on the floor.
Representative Elkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this was presented to me on Wednesday evening, and I can't explain why it's coming to us so late. I understand it also came late in the Senate. I was told that it actually was heard in committee in the Senate, though I haven't been able to find any documentation that that actually happened. But that's a very fair question. I would have the same question myself.
Any further discussion on the amendment? All
Madam
those
Speaker?
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And if Representative Elkins would yield for a question.
He will yield. Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Representative Elkins. I'm looking at the flyer that was handed out here.
Yep.
And I was intrigued when I heard about this, the bill, and I didn't quite know exactly what the physical contraption was going to be that would help give an indicator. And I agree. This is it would definitely be beneficial to allow the potential customer to help identify that it's an authentic pickup vehicle. The question I would have is this, the first question, I have 2 questions, so I'll ask them both in this, so one yield. First question is this what it would look like? Is it something that sits on the dashboard as close to the windshield weight as possible? And then if that is what it would look like, or if there's other variations of it, but if this is what it would look like, as far as I'm aware, and I could be wrong, that Minnesota law prohibits anything except for emergency vehicles, anything to be in between that would obstruct the windshield. And so how does that current law then rectify with this, or are there potential other variations? Thank you.
Representative Elkins.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this is what it would look like, and it's exactly because of that prohibition in current law that this amendment is required.
Representative Lucero. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Eklund moves to amend House File Number 1555. The amendment is coded A190501.
Representative Eklund.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I have an amendment to the amendment to get it the way I want it to be.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Eklund moves to amend his amendment to 1555. The amendment is amendment to the amendment is coded A19-0515.
Representative Eklund.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is some legislation that was passed about 15 years ago. The State Highway Patrol started interpreting it different, so it's just a cleanup. And what it is it allows logging trucks with unfinished wood trees to come to be transported to the plants, and it allows them a 5% overage because when they leave the woods, they don't know what the weight is. Our drivers are good, and they've got air indicators to show that it's close, but there's no scales out in the woods for scaling these logging trucks. And what the amendment to the amendment does is it just fully narrows that definition down to suppliers of unfinished forest products to the mills, so everybody's clear on what we're talking about.
Any discussion? Representative Green.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If Representative Eklund would yield to a question.
He will yield. Representative Green.
Representative Eklund, I'm not going to stand up and talk against this because I always am in favor of stuff like this, but I do know that especially in the spring of the year when we're granting all these permits, that being a former township officer and also knowing some of the county roads aren't really up to par on these things, did you speak to the counties and the townships on this? Do they have revenue in place to repair these roads, or is there anything within the amendment or the bill that would allow for some extra money to come in if the roads get chewed up?
Representative Eklund.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Green, this bill is not intending to circumvent the seasonal weight restrictions at all. I have talked to the Association of Minnesota Counties and the townships and told them that the companies are not looking to get around weight restrictions. This is during normal hauling seasons.
Representative Green. No further discussion. All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted to the underlying amendment. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Bernardi moves to amend House File number 1555, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A100.
Representative Bernardi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members, this bill is regarding the University of Minnesota and their transit pass that the students get for free. Currently on campus, there are 4 light rail transit stops. Students do not have, and first of all, I'd like to tell you that this was adopted in the Senate on their transportation bill as well, and we are adding an amendment to include ours in our bill as well. And what it does is it creates one more stop that they need to add on either end of those 3 stops, and which will allow students to be able to get access to fresh groceries, which they currently don't have access to on campus. Thank you.
Any
Please vote
discussion?
yes.
Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Murphy moves to amend House File number 1555, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A75.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you very much. I stand in strong support of the Murphy amendment. This is legislation that was carried several years ago related to signage in 2 harbors. I actually was visiting 2 harbors in fall. These signs look great. They are on Highway 61 and other places and are very important to the businesses so they can get off the main road and enjoy what 2 harbors has to offer.
Any discussion? Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Hornstein. Perhaps Representative Murphy could give us a little more information about how long these signs have been in place and what sorts of businesses do they send people to?
She will yield. Representative Murphy.
The signs signify businesses that are ordinary Main Street businesses, and the Main Street is about 5 blocks from the street that goes up the shore. This was a pilot project, and DOT was reluctant at the beginning, and now DOT is the one that's asking for the extension of the time period, because other communities might also want to do this. There's complete agreement with this, and there is, the cost is borne by the businesses that, the reputable businesses of Main Street Two Harbors.
Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Murphy, for that explanation. That's very helpful. We will have another amendment sometime later about another sign, and I hope the body is sympathetic to the needs of other members of this body. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hansen moves to amend House File number 1555, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A97.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a provision that was brought to me by the legislative auditor to repeal a mandate that was placed into law requiring quarterly reports with the Met Council. The auditor has existing authority and would like to have this removed.
Discussion. Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Hansen. I hate to endorse a Hansen amendment when it's so bright out, but I guess we have no choice about the timing. It's up to you, Madam Speaker. Normally we do Hansen amendments in the dead of night, but not today. We have spoken with the legislative auditor and have confirmed Representative Hansen's remarks on this, that the auditor finds these reports unnecessary, and so I would urge a green or yes vote on the Hansen amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Tice moves to amend House File number 1555, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A30.
Representative Tice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This amendment simply brings to life something that's happened already. A year ago in the Star Tribune, there was a story about a woman who had a handicap parking spot in front of her home. And because of a planned bike trail, they were going to move the spot. That just doesn't seem right to me. If you have a handicap parking spot in front of your home, and the reason she had the handicap spot was because she has MS, multiple sclerosis, and it's hard for her to basically just get around. So what they're going to do is try and move her parking spot across the road. And she said in order to do it safely, she would have to walk all the way around across the street at the crosswalk if she doesn't jaywalk, but her walking isn't that great. So what this amendment says is that basically we're going to take in consideration and not move these handicap spots. It just makes sense to me. So with that, I hope that I can get your support. And I'd like to ask for a roll call too.
Representative Tice requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hornstein moves to amend the Tice amendment to House File 1555. The amendment to the amendment is coded A101.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Tice. I do very much support what you're doing here and the concept. We have to preserve these disability parking spots. I just thought that I have a minor tweak in the language because I felt that, although the purpose of what you're doing I agree with and I think is very important, I didn't want us to start going down the road of usurping some local control. So I thought that we would instruct the governing body to place a high priority on preservation of existing disability parking so that we have made a statement as a state that this is a high priority. But at the end of the day, I do think that the local jurisdiction has to make that decision. So that's the amendment to the amendment, and I hope you'll accept it.
Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment to the amendment is adopted. On the underlying amendment, seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 126 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Barr moves to amend House File Number 1555, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A19-0508.
The member from Anoka, Representative Barr.
Madam Speaker, members, this amendment does two things. It removes the funding for the study of an extension of the North Star Light Rail to St. Cloud, and it removes all the funding for a study for passenger rail in the state of Minnesota for the entire passenger rail portion. The private sector got out of passenger rail back in 1971, and that's when Conrail sold their passenger rail to the federal government, and which is now operated as Amtrak. I have ridden Amtrak. It's a grand and glorious ride, but it's 3 times as expensive as a plane ticket and takes twice as long. So when the private sector feels that there's a need and a cost return or a return on investment for passenger rail, the private sector will be more than happy to do this on their own. This is not a proper role of government.
Representative Wolgamott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a member who wants Minnesota to compete in a 21st century economy, I rise in strong opposition to this amendment. Madam Speaker, the people of Minnesota deserve world-class transportation options, and that includes my bipartisan efforts with my St. Cloud neighbor, Representative Tama Tice, our efforts to bring the North Star commuter rail to St. Cloud. But you don't have to take my word for it, Madam Speaker. Support for bringing North Star to St. Cloud has united a broad coalition of Minnesotans from all walks of life. The business and labor communities want North Star in St. Cloud for a stronger workforce and economic development opportunities. Students of Central Minnesota's colleges and universities want North Star in St. Cloud to ride home, to interviews, jobs, events. And Madam Speaker, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the sweet old ladies in my church and at the grocery store who would like to have North Star in St. Cloud so they can visit their family members and their grandkids. Time and time again, members, I've heard directly from my constituents, the faith community, community leaders who want North Star in St. Cloud because of the opportunities and the competitive edge it would bring to Minnesota. So, Madam Speaker and members, let's finish what we started. Let's invest in this project that will uplift Minnesotans from all walks of life. Let's finish North Star. Members, I urge your red vote, and Madam Speaker, I do request a roll call.
Representative Wolgamott requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. The other member from Stearns, Representative Tice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to say that for a long time we've been trying to finish what was started a long time ago. But one of the reasons I think a study is great is because things have changed since the last time we've had one. What is also important is that we have a rail station right now, an Amtrak station that our mayor has said could serve as a station, and so that would be a great funding savings if we could use that. So I think a study would be great so that we can figure out how we can save money and do this the way it should have been done in the first place.
Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm wondering, I had a clarifying question for Representative Wolgamott.
He will yield. Representative Koznick.
Representative Wolgamott, you said let's finish light rail to St. Cloud. Does this amendment bring the North Star to St. Cloud?
Representative Wolgamott.
Madam Speaker, Representative Koznick, this amendment, the funding that this amendment is trying to delete, is would be the first step in the process. It's let's see, I've got the exact language here. It's $850,000 in fiscal year 2020 for analysis, review of the project, reassessing the design, evaluating funding alternatives, and defining the next steps. So this is the first step in that process. Representative Koznick. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative, for clarifying that this doesn't actually bring it to St. Cloud. It's just a study. And where's the funding, that $850,000 come from?
Representative Wolgamott will yield. Representative Wolgamott.
Madam Speaker, Representative Koznick, that's a general fund appropriation.
Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, you know, this is just an extension of more light rail spending that is taking money and funds away from our roads, our bridges, and our bus rapid transit.
Yes.
Operations that would be much more effective use of the dollars. I would encourage a no vote to the language in the bill, but I would support Representative Barr's amendment.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm wondering if Representative Heinrich would yield for a question.
Representative who?
Heinrich.
Representative Heinrich will yield. Representative Lucero. I didn't hear it. I know he works here. Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Heinrich, you and I have districts that are very close to each other. I know that the current North Star commuter rail goes through your district. I have ridden North Star in the past, and I wish that Representative Zerwas was on the floor right now because I would like to ask him a few questions. But I do recall several years ago he spoke in detail about North Star and some of the geography around North Star. And in that, he was talking about the vast open spaces of open fields that businesses never came to be. And so I took a ride on it myself, and I've driven it. And when I rode it, there were still these big fields of open grass, of the promises of development that would occur all around North Star. And I'm wondering, I haven't ridden it in about 2 years or so. Can you tell me, since it goes through your district, if there's any development, or are there still these vast open fields?
Representative Heinrich.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Lucero, there are certainly still some vast open areas there. I think there's some projects in the works, possibly in the future, but I don't see anything that's come up recently. Thank you.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And if Representative Vogelmont would yield for one question.
He will yield. Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Vogelmont, I'm not on the Transportation Committee this year. I was the previous 4 years. And if I just wondering if anything might have changed in terms of the amount of money that North Star is in the hole. It loses money every month, every year, and if you know what that dollar amount is, the current North Star.
Representative Wolgamott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Lucero, you bring up a good point, Representative Lucero. Currently, because North Star has ended in Big Lake, about 30 miles short of where the train was originally intended to go, it does suffer from sort of a chicken and an egg syndrome because it doesn't stop in a regional center. It does hurt the project, and it hurts the communities all along up and down the corridor. What I can tell you is that the latest numbers I have for calendar year 2017, total North Star ridership was 793,796 rides, which is the highest ridership in North Star history. Members, if we build it, they will come. And again, that's why I urge members to vote red on this amendment.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I didn't get an answer, so I'll just ask if Representative Vogelmont would yield for another question.
He will yield. Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Vogelmont, my question is, how much on an annual basis does the current North Star lose?
Representative Wolgamott.
Again, Madam Speaker, I ask that Representative Lucero vote red on this amendment because he's right. The whole project will be beneficial, more economically beneficial if we get North Star to the regional center. That will help the project and that will make that a better number that you're referring to. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Lucero.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I didn't get the number, though. So if you know what the number is, that's what I'd like you to tell me. I want to know if the number has changed from the last time I recall the number from last year. Since I didn't get an answer, Madam Speaker, would Representative Hertas yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and perhaps Representative Hertas might be able to help.
Representative Hertas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Lucero, while on the Transportation Policy Committee last year, it was stated that the cost per trip for North Star was about $47 and some change per trip. Now, they count trips you got to count 2 times that for with regard to the cost of a round trip. So it was rather shocking if you consider that a commuter who would ride 5 days a week from St. Cloud to the Twin Cities, we could probably apply that money and lease a Mercedes for each of those riders in perpetuity.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Hertas. The current North Star commuter rail is severely in the red, loses tons of money. As of last year, my recollection is $1 million per month. It's probably gone up since then. That's $12 million per year, Madam Speaker and members, that North Star is losing. And we are subsidizing that. And now to seek to extend North Star to have greater track and have more subsidizing that would be required, it's a loser. We've seen that it has not brought the development that was promised. Members, I would encourage a support of the amendment. Thank you.
Representative Hausman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, there is a little bit of a misunderstanding, I think, from several of the comments made. Several have referred to light rail. This is not light rail. This is more the definition of intercity passenger rail, which connects population centers. So when you talk about economic development, vast open fields, light rail does something very different. On University Avenue, absolutely it drove development, and all sorts of business and housing has grown up along that. But intercity passenger rail isn't there for that purpose. It connects population centers. And here's how it's appreciated all over the Midwest, including places like Wichita, Kansas, and Townsend, Texas. Everyone right now understands passenger rail is one essential part of their local healthy economy. They all want it, including cities and states governed by Republican mayors and governors all over the Midwest. So I think we're mistaking 2 different kinds of tools. This is not light rail. This is more like intercity passenger rail, which connects population centers.
Representative Barr.
Madam Speaker and members, thank you for the spirited debate here. There's a couple of things. The passenger rail portion of this amendment has pre-engineering money in it, so it doesn't really say where they're pre-engineering. That's not defined, but obviously somebody has an idea for where this should go. And the other portion of this, I agree, connecting St. Cloud and Minneapolis or St. Paul, the metro area here with St. Cloud, finishing that is a good idea. But a better way to finish that, instead of using 18th, 19th century technology, would be to use 21st century technology, or 21st century technology, and move from the train to finish the third lane on I-94 corridor to St. Cloud, because the autonomous vehicle will be here, and the grandmas that don't drive anymore, that want to come visit, the college students will be able to use the what will be developed around the autonomous with the ride-sharing pieces. And so let's not use technology that's 2 centuries old and move into the modern. Vote yes on the amendment, please.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 46 ayes and 78 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Torkelson moves to amend House File Number 1555, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A31.
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is about as simple amendment as you're going to find today or any other day. It really has just one change in it. It changes one date from 2019 to 2020, but it relates to an issue that has been somewhat controversial here at the legislature, and that is the issue of ditch mowing. Maybe not all of you are intimately familiar with ditch mowing, but I personally am, having grown up on a farm and spent many of my teenage years on a bale rack behind the baler stacking hay bales on a hay rack that's sitting at an angle about like this. It is quite an art. You got to know what you're doing, or the hay bales end up spilled off the hay rack and into the ditch, at which point in time your father gets a little angry with you. So you learn quickly how to make sure that you stack the bales carefully and on a rack that has a little bit of resistance of one sort or another to keep those bales on there. There's been an effort to turn road ditches into habitat. And frankly, for those of us that live and work in the countryside and have farm fields adjacent to these road ditches, it's just not practical. They are not meant to be habitat. There may be some limited cases where they may be available for good habitat, but for the most part, they are to conduct excess water away from our fields. They are the borders to our fields, and we don't want them full of noxious weeds and other problems. They are partly part of the safety of our roads is having a clear ditch where the driver can see what might be coming up onto the road through the ditch. So this amendment, we're going to talk some more about ditches here in a minute. This particular amendment just extends the current moratorium on any changes in ditch mowing until some sort of practical agreement can be worked out. I would encourage a green vote on the A31 amendment, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would oppose this. I believe that MnDOT has set up a process, and I would also ask maybe Representative Hansen could yield to explain a little bit more about what's going on with the agency and this issue in general.
He will yield. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would support Representative Hornstein's ask to oppose the moratorium extension. We have had the moratorium in front of us several times. It is a new day. It's a bright day, Representative Torkelson, but I think we have a new administration that I think it's an opportunity for them to approach this with fresh eyes, and if we just keep kicking the can down the road, then we won't get to that resolution. So I think the moment now is to oppose the amendment.
Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Hansen. Well, some of those cans that get kicked down the road happen to get kicked into the ditch. And if you've ever seen a hay bale that's come out of a road ditch, you might notice that it's got more than just hay in it. It has a few cans and a few bottles and a few bags and a little this and that, because that's what our road ditches have in them. We didn't really spend, at least in the Transportation Committee, we didn't really spend any time on ditch mowing this year because we didn't spend any time. We didn't have a chance to really fill out this policy, and therefore I would still recommend a yes vote on this. Kicking the can down the road is not always a bad idea, especially when you can see the can because it's nice and bright out.
Representative Grunhagen.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Yeah, I rise in support of Representative Torkelson's amendment. But the last time I checked, and I'm not on that particular committee, they wanted to move the ditch mowing, I think, into August. And the result is that much of the nutrients in the grasses and alfalfa along the roads is gone by that time. And so I think our farmers do a good service for our state by baling those grasses up and keeping it trimmed. And they certainly aren't going to do it if there's no nutritional value for their livestock. So, members, please vote green. Farming's hard enough the way it is, and let's not make it even more difficult for them. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I support Representative Torkelson and what he's attempting to do here, and I would encourage a green vote. to some of the points in my area, the ditches there are largely our drainage system. In Marshall County, for example, 80% of the legal drainage system are roadside ditches. So we need to make sure that we're keeping the cattails and all the other weeds and vegetation in there mowed down so that our drainage system actually works. We also want to keep down the noxious weeds next to our private property and also, both residential and agricultural. There's an aesthetic value. I've said before that if you want to start a real battle, come on up to Roseau County and jump on Highway 11 and drive west of Greenbush over towards Carlstead. And you tell those landowners that they're not going to be able to mow the ditches next to their property, you are going to have an amazing battle on your hands. The other thing that we hear a lot about with regards to this issue is habitat. In my area, we have lots of wildlife habitat, and it's also not just, sharp-tailed grouse and so forth, but they also talk about pollinators. But members, I fail to see the rationale behind why you would want to encourage these critters, these bees and butterflies and sharp-tailed grouse, to be near the highway. When the traffic is going by, I don't believe I've ever seen a bug hit my windshield and survive that. So we need to just restore a little common sense to this and continue to kick this can down the road. And the other thing is that when landowners do the ditch mowing, guess who doesn't have to do the ditch mowing? The state. And guess then who doesn't have to pick up the tab for the ditch mowing? The taxpayers. And the landowners do this free of charge. So I encourage a green vote. Thank you.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Hansen yield?
He will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Hansen, what do we know about the time frame for the group that you said that is beginning to meet to help bring some resolution to this? We have a growing season ahead of us. Within 2 months, if I'm a farmer and I'm going to use the road ditch hay for my livestock, I want to be mowing that on or before June 1st. So what do we know about the timing of this group, and will they be ready? Will the results be out by June 1st?
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Drazkowski, I think you might have misheard me. I said we have an opportunity here with the new administration to take a look at this with fresh eyes. Existing law provides for that August 1st requirement that that has been the statutory requirement for quite some time. But the proper place to have the discussion on this is in the committees. And that would be in the Transportation Committee, and the Ag Committee, and the Environment Committee. Those are places between now and at this point next year where we can have those discussions. But I believe those discussions take on more importance when you have the new administration who's ready to take a look at this.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Hansen. Well, members, the reason we have this amendment in front of us, and we've had the bill for each of the last 2 years that have actually written this same extension into law for 1 year each, is because the Department of Transportation, at the behest of the far left environmental groups, has required permits for farmers to do what they've been doing for generations along our roads and taking care of them. And you've heard members talk about that. They take care of them at no expense to the taxpayer. They actually figure out how to feed them to their cattle so that they can use the material. And instead we have some far left radical environmentalist groups that are pushing the Department of Transportation into limiting the ability of farmers to do for Minnesotans for free what they do the best to keep our roads as safe as they can be. Members, we have this thing called Towards Zero Deaths in Transportation. Anybody ever hear of that? Okay, it's called Towards Zero Deaths. Okay? So we're spending all kinds of money to hire people to do things, to build roads, to make them safer. And we have policy in law and permit requirements being brought forward, as I mentioned earlier, by the Department of Transportation that make it less safe along our roadways. Members, when you have big weeds, including noxious weeds, which puts the government itself in violation of its own laws, the noxious weed laws, when you have that happen, you end up with more big critters that come out closer to the road and jump out onto the road, oftentimes going through the windshield and killing people. And members, that's called towards more deaths. That's going the other direction. So, members, while we're spending money for towards zero deaths, we have our foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. So, members, there's a problem here. We need to have our roads be safe. Instead of it being safe, we have the advocates of the far left extreme organizations pushing our state Department of Transportation because they want to grow birds, bees, and butterflies in a road ditch. Now, members, those same people, if they want to see or propagate the development of roads of birds, bees, and butterflies, they need to get out of their car. And let me tell you, members, it's a great weight loss program. And for those of you far left environmental extremists listening to this presentation today, pull over safely, make sure you don't have your cell phone on, pull over, park along the road, and get out of the car. And walk into the woods, and go into the woods. You will find birds, bees, and butterflies in abundant forms. You just got to get off the road and get out of your car. And if you want to grow even more birds, bees, and butterflies, buy a piece of property before the state government buys it. And you can plant all the wildflowers and other types of things you want. You won't endanger the lives of Minnesota motorists and motorcyclists. You'll be able to grow your birds, bees, and butterflies. Enjoy them at will. You can invite your neighbors. You can invite the legislature along if you want. But we have them forcing and pushing their political pressure and their millions and millions of dollars of political influence on this body and on the Department of Transportation in limiting the ability for farmers to do what they have done well for generations, and that is protecting the safety, the aesthetics, and the quality of our Minnesota roads. So, members, I support Representative Torkelson's amendment. It will prevent the Department of Transportation from interfering with farmers who want to do what they do best. This is a pro-agriculture amendment. It's something our farmers want. I don't know a single farmer who's opposed to this. I don't know a single farmer who's opposed to mowing along the road ditches. I don't know one. And I know thousands of farmers, hundreds for sure. So, members, if you're going to vote against this, it will be once again yet another Democrat in pursuit of socialism proposal to stop the ability for farmers to do what they want to do and what they do best to protect our safety and our Minnesota roads. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Johnson.
Madam Chair, members, this is going to be hard to compete after that last speech. But Representative Drazkowski brought up some good points. The reason I stand is I'm talking about for my township officials, my county officials, the issues that they're dealing with because they can't mow the ditches in a timely manner. Years ago, they used to start mowing the ditches in late May, and a lot of farmers would because that's when the nutrients in those plants in the ditches were at their highest. It was good for the cattle and good for the horses at that time. But to save the pheasants, which I've yet to very seldom see a pheasant in a ditch that nests there, we couldn't mow the ditches until later. And now we're looking all the way to August. And what's happening? We're getting brush and other vegetation growing. But we have some very noxious weeds growing. And if you're going to, as Representative Drazkowski wants you to do, stop and walk into the woods and take a look at the birds and the bees out there, watch out for the wild parsnip that's growing in those ditches. If you think burning weed or nettle is bad, if you get in that wild parsnip, you're going to the hospital. That's growing like crazy in my community. We need this amendment now so we get these groups together. This administration has been in operation for close to 4 months. They haven't discussed it, and they know it's coming to an end. They need to deal with it, and they need to deal with it now, and not just extending the time period. Our townships and our county officials are going crazy in my area trying to deal with the wild cucumber and the wild parsnip because it hurts our kids. If they walk in the ditches, they could end up in the hospital. So please support this amendment, members.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And you know, I look at this as even a little bit differently, maybe. That is that most of us may not realize that every county has a noxious weed inspector, or at least they share with another county that goes around and inspecting for noxious weeds, and the state is not exempt from those particular laws. One of the things that as I still have a small farm, and I do have some CRP ground in it. The U.S. Department of Agriculture asked me to keep down the weeds, and you know what the recommendation is? Mowing, clipping them. And they want us to do that before they head out. And most of the weeds that you're talking about are going to head out before August. So if you're going to deal with the noxious weeds, you have two options. You can clip them, or mow them, or you can use pesticide. And pesticides are something that environmentalists don't like. Road ditches, our water runoff, etc. On top of it, those particular pesticides don't deal with the volunteer trees and other things that have to be dealt with as well. But if you clip them on a regular basis, you can actually keep that under control. So think about this as much as an environmental issue as anything else. We really want to do what is best for the environment, as well as keeping down noxious weeds, keeping down the trees from growing in, and avoiding some of those costs. Highway 60 between Faribault and Mankato, a lot of trees were growing into the ditch, and I saw for weeks at a time the highway department out there trying to trim those trees and cut them up, and now we have stumps and other things in those road ditches. So let's deal with this moratorium in a proper way. Let's just increase the moratorium, and I please support Representative Torkelson's amendment. Thank you.
The member from Clearwater, Representative Grossell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise in support of this amendment. And I'm just going to look at it completely from a safety aspect. With these weeds and grasses being allowed to grow taller in the ditches in rural areas, like you wanted, it accomplishes the bringing the insects and the birds closer to the road, but it also brings the big game out as well. It brings that closer to the road. And if you've ever been on a motorcycle and you have a deer suddenly appear in front of you at highway speeds, that spells nothing but catastrophe. That spells nothing but a possible fatality on the road. And it's and if anybody has never seen what a moose does to a compact car as that compact car drives underneath it, it's a horrifying experience just to be a witness to it. It comes through the windshield, cleans off the top of the car, and whoever was sitting in that car compartment. It takes that part of them with it. It's a very ugly scene. Even a deer maybe about 250, 270 pounds with its entrails in it at that time. It comes through a windshield on a car that's moving at highway speed. Whoever is in the path of that projectile as it's being launched through the vehicle compartment, they're not going to survive that. So to have these ditches cleaned, have these ditches mowed and kept, it makes the roadways safer for everybody that comes to that area. Not only the locals, but everybody that's passing through there, so that they can enjoy the scenery and the animals, the big game, at a safe distance. And if they do come towards the road, it gives you time to react and slow down or avoid a collision. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Carver, Representative Bowe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a former farm kid, I have fond memories of cutting the hay and the grass and baling them in the ditches, so I know the farmers appreciate that opportunity. As an environmentalist by trade, I can tell you that the roadside ditches are not the best place to rely on creating habitat, because the survivability is much less in a roadside ditch where you have cars and trucks going by all the time. And it was just mentioned a minute ago, but since I'm standing up anyway, as a motorcyclist, I can tell you that a well-mowed ditch is your friend, because you have a lot more time to see animals coming up towards you and a lot more time to react than if you have tall grass and weeds right up against the edge of the road. So it's a public safety issue in a big way. And so I rise in support of the Torkelson Amendment, and I would like to request a roll call, please.
Roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. The member from Pope, Representative Anderson.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. This has been a rather contentious, or I should say thorny issue the last couple of years. Anyway, MnDOT has tried to find a resolution here. I think it was 2 winters ago they held a series of meetings around the state, and I went to one over in Morris, and the number I think that was used was that all of the easements on state highways in Minnesota were about 175,000 acres. And I'm not saying that all of these acres are going to get clipped by farmers, but plugging a number into that of $20 an acre for mowing, baling, and hauling the bales off, which is a pretty cheap price, that's about $3.5 million of potential savings to MnDOT for not having to do this. And Madam Speaker, I want to stop. I'm going to getting into the weeds on this one, so I'm going to just support.
A roll call having been requested. Members. Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to all my colleagues who have so fruitfully embellished this argument. We'll let it go at that. I encourage a green vote on the Torkelson Amendment.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 65 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Torkelson moves to amend House File Number 1555. The amendment is coded A34.
The member from Brown, Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, just when you thought you had heard everything about ditch mowing, we're going to go a little bit deeper into the subject. I wish I could be as funny as Representative Anderson. This amendment really is one that I'm going to recommend a red vote on. This amendment is a program that would make mowing of ditches almost impossible because it is so prescriptive in the requirements and the outlines and the information that's supposed to be recorded in order to be someone who mows the ditch. We've spent a lot of time on this issue already. I don't know that we need to spend a lot more, but the point is we don't want to go into this particular perspective of ditch management. It's just impossible. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I recommend a red no vote.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, members. And this is just one of those votes where, you know, the author votes no, and it's a little bit of political theater. But in all seriousness, I think that what we just witnessed is how deeply felt these issues are. And, you know, we've spent a lot of time on finance this year, not so much policy. And I do think that this bill, which originally comes from Representative Bernardi, is a good one. And we should hear this. We should hear Representative Torkelson's ideas next year. I commit to hearing those bills. But on this one, I would urge a red vote.
Representative Torkelson.
Madam Speaker, I request a roll call.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Poppy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I too would request that you vote no, and I think it's a gotcha vote, and that's all it's intended to do is get people to vote in a certain way, and I say vote red. And it's too bad some of the people that are so now interested in agriculture didn't vote in support of the really good ag bill that we just had before this. So that's all I have to say about that. Thank you very much.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. Runbeck votes no. There being one aye and 125 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Doubt moves to amend House File number 1555, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A58.
Representative Doubt to your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is an amendment that deals with some of the data issues surrounding the undocumented immigrant driver's license bill. That bill is in this bill, for those of you that didn't see that. However, the language that is included in this bill is not the language and the agreed upon language let me say it this way. It was not the language that was amended and passed off of the House floor. I do not support that issue, but I believe that the language that's in this bill has some really big problems with it. So this amendment attempts to fix some of those problems. It removes some of the limitations on sharing of data between agencies, and it also eliminates the fine if data is shared. So we certainly want law enforcement and other agencies to have the ability to share data just like they would on you and I. So this amendment will remove those data restrictions on sharing data between departments, and I think it makes a lot of sense for public safety issues. So thank you, Madam Speaker.
Discussion. Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, I move to divide the amendment between lines 1.4 and 1.5.
Representative Winkler moves to divide the amendment between lines 1.4 and 1.5. We'll confirm that the amendment is divisible. The amendment is divisible. Representative Winkler, or to your motion.
Madam Speaker, members, so if it's
Which-
a motion, then I guess we need a vote.
Madam Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Which section of the divided amendment does the member wish to take up first?
Representative Winkler.
I will yield to a question, Representative Dowd. The second half first, and it's my intention to accept the second half.
Discussion. Consultation.
If you could
Representative Dowd.
Madam Speaker, if you can just give me a second to review that. Thanks.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Appreciate the Majority Leader's willingness to at least take part of this amendment. I'm still going to ask the body to take all of it, but I would support deleting these sections as well, and I would ask for a roll call vote on this second half of this divided amendment.
Roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Winkler's motion is to divide the amendment between 1.4 and 1.5 and take lines 1.5 through 1.8 and accept that portion of the amendment. Representative Winkler? Is there further discussion? Did I state your request and amendment correctly?
Madam Speaker, you stated my intentions, and that is correct. I will accept the second half first.
Okay. Then, and there's a roll call been requested, so the clerk will take the roll. I want to be sure that the body understands the action that we're taking. On the second portion of the amendment, lines 5 through 8. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 126 ayes and 0 nays, the motion prevails, and the amendment is adopted. The second portion of the amendment is adopted. Representative Winkler.
So, Madam Speaker, on the first half of the amendment, I would ask members to vote no. And I'm just going to explain briefly what the two differences are here. So there are two sections of this, there are multiple sections, but two main portions of the bill that Representative Dowd is referring to. On the second half of the amendment, which we adopted, it is to strip out language related to the Minnesota Human Rights Act that is unnecessary because discrimination under the Minnesota Human Rights Act already covers this issue and enforcement is already carried on. The first half, which I will ask members to vote no on, relates to data practices to make sure that when people apply for a driver's license and they do so without documentation, that information, and just the information related to whether or not they were documented, cannot be shared. So all other information related to what an applicant shares with DPS could be shared except that one section. So that's the part that I would like members to vote no on.
Any discussion? Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is the part of this amendment that I think is important. I think it's important that law enforcement and different agencies and divisions within our state have the ability to share information between themselves and also with outside law enforcement agencies, whether it be in other states or with the federal government. So this is the important part of this amendment. I would ask for your support. I think law enforcement has the ability to share this information on you and on and we shouldn't exempt another group of people from having that ability to share that information. So I'd also ask for a roll call vote on this first part of this amendment.
Roll
Madam
call has
Speaker.
been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion. The clerk will take the roll on the first part of the amendment. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. Bernardi votes no. There being 55 ayes and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail. The first portion of the amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Runbeck moves to amend House File Number 1555, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A84.
The author of the amendment, Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So this is a consumer-friendly amendment, members. The A84 amendment deals with drivers testing stations, and you've probably been hearing too about how long people are waiting in line and how difficult it is to get appointments to take a driver's test, a driver's exam. And what's interesting is that state statute addresses this, and in 2015 a law was passed that said that DPS must make sure that people can get an appointment within 14 days of contacting the driver's testing station. But I mean, we're talking about weeks and months, and it is so bad. I have a constituent who wanted to get her daughter tested. She contacted her driver's testing station in November, was told that there wouldn't be an appointment until February 19th, that she could go online perhaps to try to find something else. She did. That's really no help either. So they decided to go and just simply wait and see what might open up. And they went first one morning at 7 a.m. and found that there were 20 cars in line waiting for a test. Well, the daughter had to be in school, so that wasn't going to work. Another day, they thought, well, maybe they could tag team it, and they sent the husband, the dad. He left and got to that driver's testing station at 3:30 in the morning. There were already 7 cars in line waiting to be tested. I mean, it's just unconscionable. It's unbelievable. And the fact that this has been a perennial and continual problem goes back many years, apparently. So this amendment would say that DPS, it's time to kind of cut the cord, do what a lot of entities do, and delegate to somebody who can get it done. We are doing, I think, something like that with commercial driver's licenses. So it is in keeping with other areas where we are delegating to a third-party entity, and I would encourage your support.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Runbeck, and you certainly have identified an important issue statewide. We've heard a lot about this from our constituents. In the bill, we do have an increase in support for DPS, and it is for that purpose. We have if you look at the spreadsheet on line 371, we have an increase in staffing for driver services, and we believe we can accomplish the goals of your amendment through this, and I would encourage a red vote.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Nelson. Nelson M.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, the driver's license stations that we have open now are the same ones that were open, and we haven't increased the capacity of them when I got my driver's license a few years ago. The increase in our population that we have we shouldn't be investing. This is something we as a state should have been doing a long time ago, investing in increasing the number of stations that are out there so that people can take their tests, or opening up other offices. I know the Anoka office, I don't know if it still is, but it used to, you take your test on the actual street as opposed to the Plymouth and Arden Hills where you take it on their little course. And if we really truly wanted to do that, we should increase the capacity of that, and that means investing money in these. So I say right now we vote red on this amendment.
Representative Runbeck.
So, Madam Chair, or Madam Speaker, just another point about why the need is probably growing is that we have a lot of people who are 65 and older who are in the process of getting new hips, new knees, and all those kinds of things, which means that they're out of commission for months. They are in rehab. They lose their license in many cases, and they have to go back and actually test to see if they are now actually competent and have all of the right body function to drive a car. So this is something that's only going to get more needed. It's a perfectly appropriate thing for government to say, we don't need to provide every service. We can actually delegate that. We don't need to be the ones that do it. We can actually contract out and have a very, very good solution that is very customer friendly. So I urge a green vote.
Further discussion, the member from Freeborn, Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, I'd like to stand up in favor of this amendment. I'd like to share an email that I just got 2 days ago from Freeborn County, our DVS services there. And it says that Albert Lea and Freeborn County will see yet another reduction in DVS services. The state is reducing the staff in Albert Lea that processes and administers driver's license renewals and tests, and reassigning the clerk to Austin only. We will now have 2 examiners here for both road and written tests, and no clerk to assist to provide for additional service. As it stands, they are booked out through the end of June now. And it's notable that only 25% of the tests given in Freeborn County are Freeborn County residents. Most are individuals from the metro area coming down to complete their tests because wait times are so excessive. Members, it's obvious that we have a huge problem here, that these services are overwhelmed right now. I think having them contracted out is not a bad idea at all. I think it's actually a very good idea, and let government work together with private sources, and let's get this done so our young people and other people can get their driver's licenses in a reasonable amount of time. Thank you, members.
The member from Dakota, Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, within the bill there is a part that talks about third-party testing for a similar issue among school bus operators, and I was wondering, I believe it's Representative Eklund's provisions that are included in the bill. I was wondering, Representative Eklund, would you yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Koznick.
Representative Eklund, could you do the body a favor and just kind of highlight what those sections 73, 74, and 81 are and what they pertain to?
Representative Eklund.
Sorry, Madam Speaker, there's too much electronics over here. I believe they refer to the third-party testing for school bus drivers, Representative Koznick. The school bus drivers have a hard time providing their own certified testers. So if a school bus driver group has a third-party tester, some of the smaller companies will send their new drivers there to be tested.
Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Representative Eklund, and thank you for introducing that provision. I think it's an important provision and a good provision that Chair Hornstein had included in the bill, but it kind of highlights the point for Representative Runbeck, and I know of a family down actually from Mazeppa, and they had a daughter that was learning to drive and taking her test, and it wasn't very convenient for her. Unfortunately for her, she needed to take the test a couple times, but scheduling it was incredibly difficult, having to get up super early in the morning, as was mentioned, to come up to the Egan station, and because that was the closest they could get. The mom had to take time off of work. She's a commissioned saleswoman. And so I think it's appropriate if we can recognize the issue similarly for bus drivers, like Representative Eklund has included in the bill. I appreciate that there's extra funding to the department, but I think the amendment would highlight the importance of having additional testing, driver's testing, for families to allow them to continue to work, earn a living, and then the daughter will also have a job that she can get to without having her parents having to take time off and to drive them around. So I appreciate the amendment, and I encourage a green vote.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the A84 amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. Members, I wanted to clarify a previous statement that I made on the floor as we were discussing the division of the amendment. In an effort to clarify for the body what the motion was, I over-clarified and stated Representative Winkler's intention. It was not the intention of the chair to indicate how members should vote. Wanted to clarify. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Drazkowski moves to amend House File Number 1555, and the amendment is coded A19-0506.
Representative Drazkowski, to your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this amendment simply strikes or deletes two sections of the bill on page 67 and page 68, both dealing with the expansion of bikeways in Minnesota. Representative Hornstein and others who, I don't know whose provision this is, but we have thousands of miles of bike trails in Minnesota already. They aren't very well utilized for all the miles we have. We've created all kinds of liabilities for maintenance into the future for not only state government and their taxpayers, but the local governments as well. The two provisions in the bill really direct and work with and coordinate with local units of government and create mandates on them to become involved in the development of these bikeways. The one outlined in the bill would be a bikeway that goes from St. Paul to Canada. And what we are doing is creating more long-term mandates for not only the taxpayers of the state, but their kids as well. And members, rather than developing law that engineers the ways that people travel in this state, which we're doing with this, we're telling them, well, we're going to build more bike routes and want you to ride bikes. Instead of doing that, why don't we fix the roads we have? I would appreciate your support for this amendment and bring some common sense to this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Discussion, Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Drazkowski. I believe this is a provision that Representative Bernardi had brought to the committee, but I will speak to it. And you know, members, this wouldn't be a transportation bill if there wasn't a bike amendment from Representative Drazkowski. So I do oppose this. I think we need to be providing multiple transportation options for people. Representative Drazkowski made an excellent point about active transportation earlier, encouraging people to get out of their cars, walk, bike, get exercise, and this is one of the ways we can do this. So I would urge a no vote on the Drazkowski amendment.
The member from Dakota, Representative Koznick.
Thank you, members. You know, this bill is filled with excessive taxes all across it, whether it's practically any way a vehicle can move, it's taxed. And that's needed to support the excessive spending and taking the focus off of our roads, bridges, and buses. And so I would support Representative Drazkowski's motion.
The maker of the motion, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Hornstein yield for question?
He will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Representative Hornstein, we have more recreational use of taxpayer dollars here with this yet another really unnecessary proposal for putting more pavement down along or in the limited amount of land that we have in Minnesota for more bicycles. I just have one really salient question, and that is, will there be birds, bees, and butterflies along the bikeway?
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Dragowski. Well, it depends where you go, and of course, biking is an increasing, it's not just recreational, there are increasing number of bike commuters, so this is a very important part of our transportation mix, and I would encourage, again, a red vote.
Representative Dragowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I urge a green vote and allow us to move to the next amendment.
All those in favor of the Dragowski amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Quam moves to amend House File Number 1555. The amendment is coded A61.
Representative Quam, to your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And as it's been touched on previously, funding for bikes and the lanes, the access, etc. We don't have a current good dedicated traceable funding stream, and this would be about $1 a month for adult bikes. And frankly, I think that's reasonable. The second effect that it does is some cities used to register bikes. They did this in a fashion because for a while there was quite a bit of theft. And so this would help to identify and get bikes back to the appropriate owners, but it also would allow us to know how many bikes are in use. That would allow us to improve our planning, organization, and figuring out where best to prioritize adding bike paths, bike lanes, etc. Every other vehicle that's on the road, except for maybe I've seen a lawnmower once or twice, I think has a registration. Snowmobiles have registrations. I thought they had an ATV or ATC, whatever they're called nowadays. So frankly, since the body in their bill likes to have funding streams, looks at the fees as an appropriate way to add dedicated and targeted funding, this amendment would be compatible with the desire of the majority that have built the bill.
Discussion. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Quam. I don't believe this is a necessary amendment, and there'll be some costs associated with it that we have not allocated for, but I just don't think it's necessary at this point to create this kind of new bureaucracy for bikes, and I'd urge a no vote.
Discussion. Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Quam, for bringing this forward. We require all sorts of folks doing all sorts of things to get a license to utilize the trails and streets and roads across this state. If you cross-country ski on a state trail, you have to have a license. If you pass, I used the wrong term. Luckily, I have smart people behind me that correct me when I'm wrong. If you have an ATV, you need to pay a fee for that. Of course, a car or a motorcycle. And we've invested a lot in bike infrastructure. Look around the state, right here in the Twin Cities, bike lanes in various places on our city streets, on our state parks. We have mountain bike trails, et cetera, where we've invested heavily in facilities that these bicyclists get to use, and that's great. But having them contribute to the cause certainly is a sensible thing to do, and I support the Quam amendment.
The member from Carver, Representative Bowe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Quam yield for a question? Okay.
He will. Oh.
Thank you.
He will yield.
I'm wondering, when these dollars are collected, who collects the dollars, who holds them, who oversees where those dollars are spent for upkeep and maintenance of trails and such? Thank you.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the question. And again, would be just $1 a month. If you look at the the bill on the first page, They've got, it talks about the creation of the account. The account consists of funds collected under this section. You go on, and it has the Commissioner of Transportation is in charge of manipulating. The Commissioner of Public Safety, they've got the cost for administering the registration. But whatever money extra is left over after the cost of administrating would then go, and you've got the Commissioner of Transportation. So you've got both of those commissioners would be involved, and I believe the Commissioner of Public Safety is very good at and has quite a bit of expertise in his department on the collection of fees and how to get them into the appropriate accounts.
Representative Bowe. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Barr moves to amend House File Number 1555, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A19-0504.
The member from Anoka, Representative Barr.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is $71,000 that's being spent on something that the private sector already does really well, and that's sharing information between each other. So this is a ride-sharing kind of organization for the 494 corridor. Businesses along the 494 corridor could already have, you could already get onto Facebook, Instagram, any of the other myriad of social media avenues or outlets we have today, and do the exact same thing and not use taxpayer dollars.
Discussion. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would urge a no vote on this. Transportation management organizations are very important, not only for ride sharing, but putting out important information for commuters. This 494 group brings together local governments, businesses, and other stakeholders. They do an excellent job, and we have funded them many times in the past, and I'm glad we have them in our bill, and that's why I'd urge a no vote.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Barr moves to amend House File Number 1555, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A19-0509.
The member from Anoka, to your amendment, Representative Barr.
See if I can get this one right. Just talked to the wrong amendment here. I got too many of them, I guess, today. Went from 0 to 6 in split seconds. So anyway, this one is a series of goals in Article 4 that is put into, clean energy, multimodal, different forms of transit, encourage tourism. The goals are really nice. They're well laid out, and they're great goals. You can't legislate goals. That's why I am pulling or offering an amendment to pull these goals out of here. They should be encouraged. Goals are things that you put on the wall. They're things that you post in your business, in your could be in the bathroom. They could be in your office. Goals are things you strive to or try to attain. You can't legislate and mandate that we will magically attain these goals. So that's why I pull these measures out.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I'd urge a no vote. We do have in statute in a number of areas goals, and they have been very successful in terms of reaching them. We just had some discussion in Representative Wagenius's Representative Wagenius's bill that built on the success of our renewable energy goals. So it is very important to have, and I would urge a no vote.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Torkelson moves to amend House File Number 1555, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A42.
The member from Brown, Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker and members. In 2017, we added the first all-electric vehicle fee to Minnesota statute. It's a $75 fee that's currently in place for vehicles that are powered only by electricity. This amendment takes another step down that path as we see more and more electric vehicles on the road and higher potential for there to be more as manufacturers seem to be switching in that direction. So in this particular proposal, we would double that $75 fee to $150, still far less than what the typical vehicle pays in a year in gasoline taxes, but it recognizes that even electric vehicles do their share of wear and tear on the roads of the state of Minnesota. Along with that, in this proposal, we also recognize that hybrid vehicles also use electricity, although they don't use electricity solely for their power, but they do use electricity, which means that they're getting much better than any gas-powered car, mileage better than any gas-powered car would get. And so this now would apply a similar fee to a hybrid vehicle of half of what all electric vehicle would have under this proposal of $75 annual fee. The idea behind this is that all vehicles that use the road should pay their fair share, or at least a share, of what it takes to keep our roads in good shape here in the state of Minnesota, and I would urge a green vote on the A42 amendment.
Discussion, Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. So we, as Representative Torkelson mentioned, just the last biennium, we added the $75 fee. I think it's a little premature to add more. Electric vehicles do pay their share through increased motor vehicle sales tax, proportionally more than other vehicles, as well as license tab fees. We should be incenting these vehicles. It's about 1/4% of the state fleet at this point, and once maybe we get to 10 or 20% share, we could probably take a look at this. But I think it's a bit premature now, and again, we want to incentivize these vehicles, and they are paying quite a bit proportional to other vehicles, again, through MVEST and registration fees. Please vote no.
Discussion, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the author just brought a wonderful idea, and I'm glad that he mentioned that. I wish to work with anyone across the aisle that wants to have a moratorium so that any new fee or tax, that there's X number of years before you can raise it. I think that is a wonderful concept. Too bad we haven't had a committee meeting to be able to draft that and get it in. We've got the 24-hour deadline prevents me from drafting the amendment right here, but I think that's a concept that we have to explore. Thank you, Representative Hornstein.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Heinrich moves to amend House File Number 1555, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A33.
I call upon the author of the amendment, Representative Heinrich.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What this amendment would do is require cameras in the cab of trains to monitor engineer and crew. We heard testimony from the railroad unions in committee that part of the reason that we need two-man crews is safety in the cab and accountability for the crew members, to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do, they're not falling asleep, that they're alert, that they're not drinking or smoking on the job or distracted by electronics. Another way to monitor this is inward-facing cameras. If it's truly about safety, let's also require inward-facing cameras in the cab. The Federal Railroad Administration recently said it believes the recording devices would be valuable in revealing crew actions and interactions before, during, and after an accident. The FRA also believes that inward and outward facing cameras will give railroads the ability to monitor crew behavior to ensure compliance with existing federal regulations and rules and deter non-compliance. Members, this is about safety in my district. The governor visited the railroad crossing that we have on Highway 47 in Anoka, not but a few weeks back. That's one of the most dangerous intersections in the state for railroad crossings. And so this is a way that I think we can ensure that crew members are following standard operating procedures. And when there is an incident, we have a correct report for an after-action report to be created. So, members, I encourage your support for this amendment. Thank you. Madam Speaker, I'd like a roll call too, please.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call discussion to the amendment. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would urge a no vote. There are many existing workplace regulations that govern the actions and behavior of operators. I do agree with you, Representative Heinrich, that is a dangerous intersection. We've been wanting to get some infrastructure support for that for many years, but I think that has more to do with the layout of the situation there rather than the disposition of the crews. So for that reason, I would urge a red vote or a no vote.
Seeing no further discussion, Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Heinrich, for bringing this forward. You know, increasing the safety of our trains is certainly an important issue. We will see more activity along this line when we talk about light rail trains later, probably next week. But you know, we've had some serious accidents, especially on the light rail recently, just as recently as last week. And anything we can do to make these trains safer for the operators, the riders, and the public would be a step in the right direction. I urge a green vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Further discussion, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And it comes to mind that this will be very useful for the operators because there will be proof that they didn't do something wrong. They'll no longer have that cloud hanging over their head. There'll be actual proof showing that they did follow procedures and it wasn't their fault. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 52 ayes and 73 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Gruenhagen moves to amend House File Number 1555, the first engrossment. The amendment is coded A67.
The member from Sibley, Representative Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Members, what this amendment does, I believe it's a unifying amendment. Regardless of which side of the issue you are on global warming or climate change, you should support this amendment. Because what the amendment does, after the word climate on page 14, page 46, line 13, it adds the word and congestion management to the title. And then it also adds in line 18, insufficient availability of general purposes vehicle lanes of travel causes congestion that results, listen carefully, members, negative climate impacts. So those of us who drive cars, even if we don't agree with the global warming scenario, we still want to see more lanes and traffic moving more quickly. Those of you on the other side who do believe in global warming or climate change, you'd like to see less CO2. Well, the longer cars are in congestion, the more CO2 they're giving off, and the more you have damage to your particular theory. So I think the board should be completely green on this amendment, and I can see that Representative Hornstein should enthusiastically embrace this. And members, we're almost at 3 o'clock, so it would sure be nice to end on a bipartisan note before we take our break. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Discussion to the amendment, Representative Hornstein.
I would encourage a no vote. You can't build your way out of congestion. Just look at the San Diego Freeway in LA or the Katy Freeway in Houston. It's not a good scene down there. Please vote no.
Seeing no further discussion, Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you. I know that we're just about to end here, but Representative Hornstein, you've been saying for weeks now that congestion is one of the reasons that you're adding so much revenue to the transportation budget, and that congestion is one of the issues that you want to address. It seems like you've taken a different stand here on this particular amendment. Members, I would urge a green vote for the Gruenhagen amendment.
Representative Gruenhagen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would request a roll call.
Roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Hornstein, it's difficult for me to understand such a uniting amendment can cause any type of division. So I hope members will vote for this, as the study would help us alleviate congestion and reduce CO2 emissions. Now, personally, I like CO2 emissions. We wouldn't have green grass or green trees or flowers or anything without it. Oh yeah, we're just about 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock. But with that, members, please vote green. And I think even Representative Hornstein, if he thinks things through between now and the time he votes, he'll vote green. Thank you.
Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know that we're trying to get out of here and we're almost done, which is why I stood to rise. Please vote green.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Members, please vote. The clerk will close the roll. There being 51 ayes and 74 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, I move that House File 1555 be laid on the table, as amended.
Representative Winkler moves that House File 1555 be laid on the table. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. Reports from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Winkler from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for the day for Tuesday, April 30th, 2019, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bills. Senate file numbers 2227 and 2314.
Sorry, I moved ahead too fast. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there's no objection, we will take action on these motions first. Hearing no objections, the motions prevail.
Introduction of House Resolution Number 1, a House resolution recognizing the first Thursday in May as a day of statewide prayer, fasting, and repentance in Minnesota. The resolution is being referred to the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Announcements. Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 9 a.m. Monday, April 29, 2019.
Representative Hansen, announcements.
A motion.
Members, we are still taking action on the floor, I'd ask for quiet in the body. Representative Hansen. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm moving too fast. Representative Winkler moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 9 a.m. Monday, April 29th, 2019. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. Announcements, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Today is Arbor Day. Yeah, you can clap. It's Arbor Day. The first Arbor Day was on April 10th, 1872 in Nebraska. And on that very first Arbor Day, over 1 million trees were planted on one day. Now that's kind of amazing when you think about it, 1 million trees planted in one day. What we're doing right now is part of a tradition that, as far as we can tell in the Minnesota House, has been occurring over 25 years. This bipartisan tradition of providing trees for you has been going on to help celebrate Arbor Day. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, we have a number of members who are going to talk a little bit about how to plant your tree, what the tree is, and where the tree came from. So first we'll go to Representative Bowe, then Representative Vang, and then Representative Hamilton. So I would yield to Representative Bowe.
Members, please take your conversations into the retiring room or into the alcoves. I recognize Representative Bowe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Everybody sit down. I've got a great story. Shouldn't take more than 20, 30 minutes, and then we'll be good. So, happy Arbor Day. Now, these trees we've all pitched in. It's a bipartisan effort, and take them home and plant them. Do not plant them in the road ditch because they'll be mowed this year. We tried to fix that. But anyway, just a couple of quick thoughts. Trees bring many positive attributes to us. They bring positive property values of 3 to 7% increase in values. Shade in the summer, wind block, which means warmer temps in the house in the winter. Cooling shade. They prevent soil erosion. They absorb carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide. They release oxygen. In fact, there will be a quiz later, pay attention. The average tree removes 300 pounds of carbon dioxide per year, okay? And that's just the average tree. Yours may be above average. The average tree provides 50% of the oxygen needed for one person per year. So 2 trees in the yard, you're all set. So quick thought on how to plant a tree correctly. Step number 1, which is the most important, you call Gopher State 1 call, okay? So call 811. Secondly, dig a good hole. My grandpa used to tell me the secret for a nice tree in your yard is to plant a 50-cent tree in a $5 hole. So put the effort into digging a good hole, okay, twice as wide as the root ball, no deeper than needed. Scrape the edge just a little bit so that the edge of the hole is not smooth anymore. The roots can grow in better. Remove all foreign material from the roots, including bags, strings, and burlap. Gently fill the hole with the soil that you removed to dig the hole as you're putting the tree back in. Do not pack it down, that will damage the roots, but just water it in little by little. Stake it only if needed. Mulch around the tree. Do not let the mulch touch against the trunk. Water for the first couple of years, a good soaking watering. Do not overwater. Protect from animals and teenagers with weed whackers. And do not fertilize for the first year. Those are my basic instructions. Happy Arbor Day. I'm yielding to someone else now, but I can't recall who anymore. Madam Speaker.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Vang.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, the tree you are receiving today is called the red pine, also known as Norway pine. It has been the state tree of Minnesota since 1953. The bark is thick and gray-brown at the base of the tree, but thin, flaky, and bright orange-red in the upper crown, which is what the tree's name derives from this distinctive character. The tree has supplied much of the timber that was harvested in the state in years gone by and helped lay the foundation for much of the wealth in Minnesota. The tree is a sturdy and majestic tree known for its long life, free from disease and insect attack. It is recognized as a tree desirable for planting in connection with reforestation. Thank you.
Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Schumacher Nursery and Berry
Members,
Farm.
we are still conducting House business.
Thank you,
Representative
Madam.
Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The trees come from Schumacher Nursery and Berry Farm, located just outside of Heron Lake, Minnesota, in the district that I serve. They're wonderful people, wonderful staff working there, and it's a wholesale conservation nursery specializing in native seedings, trees, shrubs, and conifers, and they have over 100 years in strawberries. So take your family out there and experience that. You can pick your own. Again, wonderful people located just outside of Heron Lake. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Announcements. Representative Olson.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Olson moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion prevails and the House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. Monday, April 29th, 2019.